Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the Council to order. Thank you for joining us. We have two items on the agenda today. First, we'll hear a presentation from Treasury staff on the Council's proposed Financial Stability Risk Monitoring Framework and its proposed interpretive guidance on non-bank financial company designations before voting on both the framework and the guidance. Then we'll vote on the minutes of our February meeting, as well as two meetings that we held in March. Our first agenda item is a discussion and votes on two proposals. The first is the Council's proposed framework for financial stability risk identification, assessment, and response. The second is the proposed interpretive guidance on non-bank financial company designations. Before we turn to the presentation, let me first speak about how the recent banking developments demonstrate the importance of the actions we're about to take. Last month, the government took necessary actions to decisively manage the fallout from the failure of two regional banking institutions. Our goal was to mitigate the serious risk of contagion and protect the broader banking system and economy. The situation has stabilized in the past few weeks, and our banking system remains sound with strong capital and liquidity positions. Of course, we continue to be vigilant and monitor conditions closely. Still, these developments have reminded many of the fear and uncertainty that can accompany financial disruptions. For all in this room, I'm certain that the developments underscored the importance of our work on financial stability, to continue to improve the resilience of the financial system that can support the economy through both good times and bad. Last month's events show us that our work is not yet done. The authority for emergency interventions is critical, but equally as important is a supervisory and regulatory regime that can help prevent financial disruptions from starting and spreading in the first place. I believe that the votes we will take today advance that very mission. We will first vote to issue for public comment a proposed analytic framework on financial stability. This framework provides new public transparency into how the Council does its work, how it identifies, assesses, and mitigates risks to financial stability. It's the first time the Council has published such a document. This framework outlines common vulnerabilities and transmission channels through which shocks can propagate through the financial system, and it lays out how the Council considers the tools it will use to address these risks. The framework emphasizes the importance of taking a comprehensive and rigorous approach. Addressing the diverse range of financial vulnerabilities that exist today and that may arise tomorrow requires a broad set of flexible tools. Importantly, the Council does not broadly prioritize one type of tool over another. Rather, we plainly examine a risk and design our response to address the risk we're seeking to mitigate. Often, the Council will determine that a risk should be addressed by existing regulators, using what is sometimes called an activities-based approach. These may be instances where systemic risks emanate from widely conducted activities in a particular sector or market. FSOC has made activities-based recommendations in traditional areas like money market and open-end funds, as well as in newer areas like crypto assets. Many of these risks and recommendations are described every year in the Council's annual reports. But there may be certain instances when systemic risks could emanate from a particular entity, one that might not be within the jurisdiction of a regulator with adequate prudential or supervisory authorities. In that case, an entity-focused approach may be more appropriate. That's exactly why Congress gave the Council the authority to designate non-bank financial companies for Federal Reserve Board supervision and enhanced prudential standards. And it's why the Council is also voting today to issue proposed guidance that would enable us to use that tool effectively should it be needed. We're proposing revisions to certain elements of the Council's existing guidance that have made it difficult to use its non-bank designation authority. The existing guidance issued in 2019 created inappropriate hurdles as part of the designation process. These additional steps are not legally required by the Dodd-Frank Act, nor are they useful or feasible. Some are based on a flawed view of how financial crises begin and the costs that they impose. It's been estimated that a designation process with these steps could take 6 years to complete, and that is an unrealistic timeline that could prevent the Council from acting to address an emerging risk to financial stability before it's too late. The designation tool serves as an important part of our post-global financial crisis defense. It's an important preventative tool to address systemic risks that may arise from a non-bank financial firm whose activities or distress could threaten the financial system. We're acting today to restore the effectiveness of this authority. As we do, we're also taking significant steps to ensure that the Council's non-bank designation process is rigorous and transparent. The proposed guidance provides for strong procedural protections. This includes significant engagement and communication with companies under review, minimizing administrative burdens on these companies, while providing ample opportunities to be heard. The Council will also engage with the company's primary regulator during any designation review. And through the separate proposed analytic framework, we're providing the public with more information about how non-bank designation fits into the Council's broader approach to financial stability, risk monitoring, and mitigation. In all, I believe that our votes today are a major step towards strengthening our safeguards for the U.S. financial system. We look forward to public comments on these proposals. Let me now turn to Sandra Lee, Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Council, who will provide an overview of these proposals.
Thank you, Secretary Yellen. I appreciate the opportunity to present to the Council on these two proposals, which staff of FSOC member agencies work closely together to develop. The proposed analytic framework that the Council is considering today describes the approach the Council would take in identifying, assessing, and responding to risk to financial stability. This framework would apply regardless of whether a risk relates to a widely conducted activity or to specific entities. The proposed analytic framework does not impose obligations on any entity, but would help market participants and other members of the public better understand how the Council approaches potential risks. The framework is composed of 3 parts. First, it describes the Council's monitoring function. To enable the Council to identify potential risks to U.S. financial stability, the Council would monitor a broad range of markets, asset classes, and types of entities. These are described in the proposal. Second, the proposal describes how the Council would assess potential risks. The Council will work with regulators to evaluate potential risks to determine whether they merit further review or action. The evaluation of a risk would be fact-specific, but the proposed analytic framework highlights vulnerabilities that most commonly contribute to such risks, such as leverage and liquidity risk, and includes quantitative metrics that the Council may use to measure those vulnerabilities. The proposal also explains 4 transmission channels that the Council would use in evaluating the potential for the negative effects of a risk to spread to other parts of the financial system. Third, the proposed analytic framework describes how the Council would address identified risks. The Council has a range of authorities it may use. Under the proposal, in many cases, the Council would work with regulators to seek the implementation of actions to address a risk. Alternatively, the Council may issue recommendations or may use one of its designation authorities. Under the proposed analytic framework, the Council would not prioritize among its authorities for addressing risks. Instead, the Council's actions would depend on the nature of the vulnerability. For example, vulnerabilities from activities that are widely conducted in a market over which a regulator has adequate authority may be addressed through an activity-based response. In contrast, where a particular financial company's distress could pose a threat to financial stability, an entity-based action may be appropriate. The second document the Council is considering today, the proposed interpretive guidance on non-bank financial company designations, focuses solely on the procedural elements of the Council's non-bank designation authority. Under this authority, the Council may designate a company for supervision by the Federal Reserve and prudential standards if the Council determines that material financial distress at the company or the company's activities could pose a threat to U.S. financial stability. The proposed non-bank designations guidance seeks to establish a durable process for the Council's designations under Section 113 of the Dodd-Frank Act. This proposal would restore the Council's ability to address risks to financial stability, provide transparency to the public and to firms that are reviewed for potential designation, and ensure a rigorous and clear designation process. The Council, under the proposal, would follow a two-stage process. During the first stage, a company would be subject to preliminary analysis based primarily on information available to the Council through public and regulatory sources and would be notified during the process. If the company is selected for additional review, the Council and staff will engage with the company extensively during Stage 2 as the Council assesses potential risk to financial stability. After Stage 2, the Council may make a proposed designation, after which the company may request an oral hearing. After any hearing, the Council may vote to make a final designation. For a designated company, the Council would encourage the company or its regulators to take steps to mitigate the identified risks. The Council would reevaluate the designation at least annually, including further engagement and two-way communication with the firm and its regulators, and would rescind the designation if the Council determines that the company no longer meets the statutory standards for a designation. The proposed non-bank designations guidance addresses only the Council's procedures related to designations. The risk factors the Council would consider are described in the separate proposed analytic framework document. As a result, the proposed non-bank designations guidance does not include two analytic factors that were added to the existing guidance in 2019. Statements that the Council would consider the likelihood of a company's distress and that the Council would conduct a cost-benefit analysis for each designation. This change is intended to help enable the Council to use its statutory authorities as appropriate while maintaining rigorous procedural protections for companies that are reviewed for potential designation. These two proposals would result in a more transparent and effective risk monitoring process for the Council and would bolster the Council's ability to identify, assess, and address potential risks to U.S. financial stability. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Before we vote, thank you, Sandra. I know some Council members would like to speak. Let me first turn to Chair Powell.
Thank you, Secretary Yellen, and thanks to the FSOC staff for the effort and expertise behind the revised analytical framework and non-bank designation process guidance. I'm delighted to support the revised process guidance and analytical risk framework, and I'll vote to approve these documents for release for public comment. It has been over a decade since the Dodd-Frank Act gave the FSOC the power to designate non-bank firms. In that time, the FSOC has gained a great deal of insight into Section 113 designations. We've seen that the financial system continues its constant evolution, underscoring that no single solution can address every financial stability risk. And I believe it is fitting for the Council to regularly assess its toolkit and consider how best to use our full range of tools to respond to systemic risks, whether the risk arises from an activity, an event, or a firm. I'm pleased that the Council chose to publish the analytical risk framework for the first time. The framework provides an overview of how the Council identifies and assesses risks and delineates the range of authorities available to the Council under the Dodd-Frank Act. It also emphasizes that the actions the Council may take will depend on the nature of the risk that it intends to address. The non-bank designation process guidance describes the Council's method of determining whether to designate a non-bank firm. The process allows for several stages of analysis rooted in the analytical risk framework before a designation is approved. Overall, I believe that the changes proposed by the Council will create a balanced approach to addressing potential risks to the U.S. financial stability and ensure that all the tools available to the FSOC will remain on an equal footing. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Gensler.
Thank you, Secretary Yellen. I want to thank the Council, the staff, and for you developing today's guidance on non-bank determinations, which I'm pleased to support. History is replete with times when tremors in one corner of the financial system or at one financial institution spill out into the broader economy, and such risk can originate not only from the banking sector, as we've seen in the last 6 weeks for sure, but also the risk can originate outside of the banking sector. And early in my public service career, 25 years ago, in fact, when I was serving in the U.S. Department of Treasury, I witnessed one of these events rather up close. I was asked by then Secretary Rubin to fly up to Connecticut on a fateful weekend to visit the highly levered hedge fund, Long-Term Capital Management, which was about to fail. Subsequently, I was asked to staff the President's Working Group review of the matter, and we found that event, quote, highlighted the risk of excessive leverage, the possibility that problems at one financial institution could potentially pose risks to the financial system as a whole, end quote. Highly negotiated sentence, by the way, between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve at the time. The 2008 financial crisis, much greater in magnitude, was yet again an example of systemic risk emanating out from both the banking sector and the non-bank sectors alike, lest we forget millions of people lost their job and small businesses shuttered across this great nation. In response, Congress set up this interagency council, tasked with important authorities and mandates to better guard against systemic risk, recognizing that risk from both banks and non-bank financial companies can emanate throughout our economy, hurt everyday Americans. Congress tasked this council to designate which non-bank financial entities were systemically important financial institutions, and then such designation would subject them to the regulation and supervision of the Federal Reserve. I was honored nearly 13 years ago to serve on the first council, including when we considered and later approved a 2012 initial rule implementing those procedures. Marty, I think you might have been there as well. As I said when we approved that rule, effective regulation of systemically important non-bank financial entities is essential to preventing risk from such entities from spreading to the U.S. economy. This rule helps protect taxpayers from picking up the bill for such a financial entity's failure. I'm pleased to support today's recommendation, which would reinvigorate this council's designation process in line with what I think was Congress's vision for our work. As important as today's step is, and as the Secretary and Chair Powell both said, I believe this is just one tool in the toolkit. Each of our agencies have important roles within our respective authorities to enhance the resiliency of the financial system. At the SEC, we're working along with fellow council members to do just that, enhancing the resiliency of the U.S. Treasury markets, money market funds, open-end funds, private funds, clearinghouses, dealers, and with regard to cybersecurity, we've also adopted rules to shorten the settlement cycles in securities by half. Lest we forget the risk posed by the near collapse of long-term capital management in 1998, we also must build upon the work of the Hedge Fund Working Group. That means looking at large, interconnected, highly levered hedge funds, the associated repo markets for financing, the prevalence of low to zero haircuts in such funding, and the extension of leverage from banks and prime brokers. Those events 25 years ago also impressed this upon me. Though we're never going to get rid of risk in the system, we must best identify, manage, and guard against such risks to protect the American public. I thank you, and I support today's guidance.
Thank you. Chair Grunberg.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Like Gary indicated, there's nothing like past experience to focus your mind going forward, and we have some genuine experience to work off of here. The mission of the Financial Stability Oversight Council is to look broadly for risks that could adversely affect the U.S. financial system and economy, and to work across agencies to address emerging risks. For that reason, I support the two documents on the agenda today. They provide transparency on how the FSOC looks for and evaluates risk, and put in place a workable framework to use the full range of the FSOC's tools. I'd like to thank the Secretary for her leadership in moving these two documents forward for action today by the FSOC. The analytic framework for financial stability risk identification, assessment, and response outlines the types of risks the FSOC needs to monitor, flags key transmission channels for those risks to affect the broader financial system, and lays out the broad range of tools that the FSOC has to address systemic risks beyond the normal regulatory and supervisory work of the member agencies. I believe this is the most thorough description of the FSOC's approach that has been shared publicly, and I welcome that transparency and the opportunity for public comment so that we can make sure we've considered all the risks and transmission channels that the FSOC should be reviewing. I also support the proposed revisions to the Council's guidance for non-bank financial company determinations. Past crises have taught us that we need to be prepared to use all the tools of the FSOC to prevent damage to the U.S. financial system. Designating non-bank financial companies for enhanced supervision is one of the tools at the Council's disposal, and these reforms will help make it a tool that the FSOC can use credibly and effectively. Importantly, the new guidance would assign clear responsibility to the Systemic Risk Committee of the FSOC for regular monitoring and reporting about non-bank financial firms that may pose a risk to financial stability and merit further review. It would also leverage the work of the FSOC's other working groups and committees to bring together experts from multiple agencies to undertake specialized risk reviews. This process will create a credible, systematic review of potential risks in firms across the financial system and enable the FSOC to utilize effectively all the tools within its authority. Finally, I would also like to thank the Council's member agency staff really for their very thoughtful work in developing these documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Acting Controller Sue.
Thank you, Secretary Yellen, for your strong leadership of the Council on this very important topic. And I also want to extend my thanks to Sandra and the FSOC team and staff of the Council for their work on this. I support the issuance of the proposed guidance. Revising the guidance on non-bank designations is important to improve the balance and transparency of the Council's work. In addition, the new proposed analytical framework would make it easier for the Council to explain its analysis of potential risks and create an opportunity for richer public input. These two proposed documents would make clear that the Council has access to all the tools provided to it by the Dodd-Frank Act so that we can monitor and address risks to financial stability effectively. Recent events have underscored the importance to all Americans of having a sound and resilient financial system and make it essential that the Council has access to the broad range of tools that Congress provided it. It's also appropriate that the Council provide transparency to the public about how it might consider using these tools and invite public input. I support the publication of these documents for notice and comment in furtherance of these goals. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and I appreciate your leadership on this issue as well as the work of the Council staff. The Council's reconsideration of the framework and the process by which it might designate a non-bank financial company as systemically important is much needed. The statutory intent of the Dodd-Frank Act was to give FSOC a range of flexible tools to deal with potential threats to financial stability. This toolkit given to us by Congress includes the authority to designate a non-bank company for consolidated supervision and enhanced prudential standards by the Federal Reserve when circumstances warrant it. The previous guidance on non-bank designations finalized in 2019 needlessly hampers the ability of the Council to consider and use this important tool and sets up an overly lengthy and Rube Goldberg-like process with various hurdles for doing so. This new guidance that we are releasing today for public comment provides a substantial improvement in this process. It has the important attributes of being clear, credible, balanced, and consistent. The events of the last month remind us that the problems at one financial institution can develop rapidly and spread into the financial system. We are also reminded that the Council needs to be nimble and proactive in order to be effective. That's why I'm pleased to support both documents. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thanks to all who are working on this important initiative. One of the biggest problems we face when confronting the dangers in our financial system is regulatory amnesia. While the financial crisis ruined the lives of families across the country, memories sometimes fade quickly, including in Washington. A key lesson of the 2008 crisis was the lack of attention paid to systemically important financial institutions that were not traditional commercial banks. Major non-bank financial companies essentially received a free pass from many key requirements that banks faced. Unsurprisingly, after the failure of Lehman Brothers, the United States entered a process that engaged in massive bailouts of AIG, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and more. But regulators seem to have forgotten. A key post-crisis reform was the ability for regulators to designate a non-bank financial institution as systemically important, which subjects the firm to stronger supervision by the Federal Reserve and financial stability safeguards. The FSOC currently has 0 firms on its roster of systemically important institutions under this core authority. I'm not sure there's many people who really believe that these systemically important non-banks no longer exist. Put simply, market participants have started to believe that the FSOC lacks credibility when it comes to non-bank designation. But we are taking today such an important step to change this. In 2019, the FSOC effectively repealed the ability to designate these institutions by adding an array of dubious process strictures. 2 former secretaries of the Treasury and 2 former chairs of the Federal Reserve Board, including Secretary Yellen, correctly predicted that the changes would neuter the designation authority. The proposed guidance we are voting on today, if finalized, will create a clear path for the FSOC to identify and designate systemically important non-bank financial institutions. Importantly, this will help to change the perception of market participants that the FSOC and its published reports are talk and not action. This is critical. In addition, the action will accelerate efforts to identify potential shadow banks for candidacy of designation. We will be able to turn some of our important work identifying risks in a number of sectors, non-bank mortgage, hedge funds, and more, into more rigorous firm-specific analyses that could lead to designation. We must constantly be on the lookout for amnesia. At the CFPB, which was established in the wake of the crisis, non-bank supervision is among the most important work we do. I know all of us on this council are very grateful to you, Secretary Yellen, for leading this effort to bring the FSOC's tools back to life, and I'm so pleased to support this guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. This proposal represents the standard of excellence that the staff of the Council and its members regularly exhibit. I thank them for their contributions. Cassandra Lee led this project, as well as others on the Deputies Committee, all of whom worked diligently to develop these important documents. I support proceeding with the rulemaking process. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Then is there a motion to approve the resolution on notice of proposed analytic framework for financial stability risk identification, assessment, and response? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Second, is there a motion to approve the resolution on notice of proposed guidance regarding non-bank financial company determinations?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So the resolutions are approved. Our last agenda item is to vote on the minutes of the Council's February meeting, as well as the 2 meetings we held last month regarding market developments. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution approving the minutes of February 10th, 2023 Council meeting?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The resolution is approved. Second, is there a motion to approve the resolution approving the minutes of the March 12th, 2023 Council meeting? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution is approved. And finally, is there a motion to approve the resolution approving the minutes of the March 24, 2023 Council meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The resolution is approved. Before we adjourn, does anyone have any other business to raise? Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
I move.
Motion.
And second. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.